there's a lot of hype around this. There was an MIT study, you and I talked about it, that sort of alleged that 95% of ventures around AI fail to materialize or don't materialize in the way that was intended. There's an extraordinary amount of money that's being invested around this. I find myself grounded in the particulars of a use case, but talk a little bit about the hype.
Yeah, so yeah, the MIT study that came out basically found that 95% of AI projects that are happening at organizations have produced zero to little value, essentially. My take on this is there was an overabundance of the use of LLMs and AI internally at organizations in the context of chatbots. I think that was a really easy initial kind of implementation because all of us were trained to interact with ChatGPT. But I think then if you start to look at it, it's hard to understand internally within an organization, especially in the context of like, a procurement function or a supply chain function or a maintenance technician function. It's hard to measure the ROI of a chatbot in that context. Mm-hmm. And that kind of interface only really captures one part of the equation. Because if you like simplify a human decision to 3 components, right? There's a problem, and a human is first going to go and access knowledge. That is pretty one-to-one with like interacting with a chatbot. But then after that, they access that knowledge, then they're going to reason about what do I do given this knowledge to fix that problem, and then they're going to go make a decision, right? And right now, like what the chatbot does is kind of leaves that entire second half out of the equation.
Right, but let's pause on that for a second, because you and I have worked together for a while.
Yep.
Part of what I was attracted to was, candidly, where you began in the military, which is that if you had someone in the field of battle, and that there was reams of data that would inform a decision that that person has to make, by definition, they can't comb through that data or they'll be dead.
Yeah.
And so will their team. And so you, Palantir, came up with a means by which you can ingest that data and then offer out alternatives, simple choices.
Yep.
So extrapolate that to what we're doing or what industry is doing away from the military.
And what's interesting about it is like in the military context, they call it an OODA loop, right? But guess what? In corporate world, that's business process. It's the same thing, right? And in that context, like what we're doing with the military is like, how do I integrate a bunch of different sensors about what's happening on a battlefield? How do I understand in logic about the best response to that, given what the current scheme is? And then how do I make sure that all the checks are kind of done correctly? Is the JAG informed and have they signed off? And how do I get to a decision of how to react to that quickly? That's a business process. It just happens to be different data and different inputs or different logic, right? And when it comes down to it, even though it sounds incredibly crude, is right, like, how do I then do that with a maintenance technician? Or how do I do that with someone who's thinking about how to get someone to renew, right? Which is like, how do I identify the OODA loop, and how do I understand the right data to inject into that equation and the right logic such that like the right decision happens?
Tyler and Tony, let me ask you both the same question. So here it is, you're coming out of MIT or the like, and you're thinking big thoughts about the application of AI. Why did you choose real estate? And why did you choose multifamily or single family as a place to start?
Yeah, I mean, when we were starting, we were very passionate about AI, machine learning, but at the time, the biggest applications were mostly in advertising, and I didn't feel like I want to spend the next 10 years trying to make people watch more YouTube videos. We kind of believe like...
Nothing wrong with that.
Super fair. Yeah.
I mean, it's a great business model,
yeah.
But we kind of believe like you want to use technology for something that you make cheaper, something that's fundamental to people, and real estate is like important to everybody. So we thought like there's a big opportunity to do that. My co-founder took a job at a real estate company, quickly figured out like communication is such a bottleneck, so that's where we kind of started. But yeah, I think it was like we just wanted to apply it to something real.
Oh, so in college, coming out, and I started working in a company called Entrada. That's why I drew the analogy of websites. You know, back in 2012, and this is the funny thing we got to remind ourselves. You know what percentage of renters were paying rent online in 2012? I mean, today it's 100%. It was in 2012, 3% of renters were paying rent online. The other 97% were taking checks to the office. You know, keep in mind, PayPal had been around for like 10 years. And so I think, to your question, you know, I got to see this adoption of websites, you know, moving the shopping process online away from the paper shopping process. You know, the adoption of fintech. We call it fintech now. Back then it was just payments. And to Tony's point, there's a lot of places you can apply these technologies, and that's the most exciting thing about AI. You know, you hear Danny talking about, you know, what Palantir is doing, and I genuinely get really excited about the world's best engineers working on housing, right, and thinking about how to improve that housing experience. And so, yeah, I think there's a lot of places that myself and my team could go apply our skills, but there's nothing better than doing it in housing. Like, there's nothing at the end of the day that is more valuable. It's easier to rally a team around. And software people in particular, we're very mission-oriented. Like my team, we start every meeting with our mission is to create a better renter experience.